Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, a little while ago in a Facebook group, it was not the private Facebook group or one of the private Facebook groups I talk about very often. It was, I think it's a public one. It's a video response community. Maybe it's not public. It's one that Tim Harper put up for us to make video responses to each other. There was a topic that floated up about making backup characters, and I made an internal video. I was going to try to upload it and put it here, but the volume was way too quiet, and I just didn't want to mess around with it, so I figured I'd kind of recut it for YouTube. Because there's an interesting question that got asked, how many of you bring backup characters to a game? And the response that the original asker of the question, the person that posited the question, the response he got was very low in terms of people actually brought backup characters, which was puzzling to him. And he gave one of the examples of why you should maybe bring up backup characters is the idea that you have somebody, and I think we've all had this experience where a person has their character die, and then early in a session, and as play goes on, they're kind of making their character and they're interrupting gameplay to ask the game master questions or whatever, and everybody's like, well, dude, haven't you figured out how to do this yet, and whatnot. And I think I've been that guy, too. So I understand. So I'm going to take it, mostly my experience rather than some kind of philosophy. But, first things first, like, should you bring a backup character? Well, that's a session zero thing. That's a social contract. That's a discussion you have to have with the group up front. How do we want to handle this sort of thing? So there is no real should. The thing that had me laughing as soon as I heard this, it's been my experience. It seems to be kind of a truism that the easier it is to make a backup character in the heat of the moment, the simpler character creation is, the more likely we are to have them already prepared. At least for me. And the harder, the more arduous that character creation might be, the longer, more drawn out a process it would be. The times it would be really handy to have a backup character handy, we don't have one. We haven't made one. And of course, the reason for this is obvious. It doesn't take very much time to go ahead and make a few more backup characters for your guy in one of these really simple. Let's roll 3d6 and put him in order and, figure out his name. His name is Bob. Okay, and just kind of file them away for later. And if you have a character creation process that takes like 30 minutes, well, you're probably not going to do that with another character. That was funny. I forget which person in the discussion said, they enjoyed making characters, and so it wasn't a big deal for them to have a stable of backup characters. And I thought about this, and I don't think I've ever really, had that super enjoyment of making a character for a character's sake. Yeah, maybe in the beginning, learning a new system. I remember making a bunch of Ubiquity pre-gens for a zombie apocalypse game that I ran. Here where I kind of used the Ubiquity system to do that, and so I needed a bunch of pre-gens, so I made a bunch, and that was neat practice in how to make characters and what have you. But it was fun, but it wasn't super fun. I'm not going to go pick up one of these books now and say, let me go make some characters. That's not really fun for me. And part of it is, as I thought about it, was in a system that's really, really easy to create a character when I'm just rolling 3d6 6 times and figuring out who they are. Okay, well, this guy is Surly. His name's Bob. He's a warrior, and filing it away. There's not a lot of investment in that character. I don't want to say emotional investment, but maybe a little bit, just as the idea you really start to get into who they are. Whereas, you certainly can, but you don't necessarily have to. That's not a big part of character creation, at least mechanically. Doing all the real footwork of getting this person ready to insert into the adventure, or whatever you want to call it. Whereas in a lot of other games, when I made my Mithras character, made characters for Delta Green, my Philippe Moreau for All for One, there's a lot more stuff that goes into that character creation, and so you're kind of more invested in that character at that point. And when I'm done to that point, that level, I want to play that character. I don't want to maybe play that character. It's somebody that I'm really interested in playing and seeing who they are. So probably that's, or at least for me, that's probably one of the reasons that I don't necessarily, make characters for a character's sake. So it's not that enjoyable. So I'm less likely to have that backup character handy. Anyhow, the interesting thing about having these backup characters to me is, from whence do they come? Why are they here? Are they just prisoners of the orcs in the next room? How do they get here? And that's an important thing to consider. Now, I remember being in a game run by, I can never remember his real name, which makes me feel bad. He lives in New York, I think. Handy Haversack is his moniker on the internet. He was a very, very skilled game master in various ways, just really engaging, brought everything right. We were playing a dungeon crawl, and he made it really, really gripping and really, really fun. And your attention was constantly on the game. And a lot of it was his ability to people wrangle and get you right there in the moment. But there was a lot of character death that happened. We're playing astonishing sorcerers and swordsmen and sorcerers of Hyperborea. First level characters, very, it's a dungeon crawl. It's high lethality. So there are far more pre-gens on the table than there were players, and this was by design. And so as the game goes on, various people have their characters die more or less frequently. I think mine lived the entire time, but went insane. But he was really, really skilled at bringing the, as the player grabbed for the next pre-gen sheet after their character bit the dust. He was very skilled at bringing them in with this really, fun narration, and it was, kind of cornball, but it worked for the genre, where somebody gets brought in by a couple of flying insects because we're in this room fighting these flying insects, and they brought this guy in for dinner, or some other guy washes in this, underground stream, having first fallen in, on the surface world, and he just narrated in that really fun manner. Okay, here's where this guy comes from, as opposed to them being prisoner of the orcs in the next room. However, that's funny, but on a more serious note, where does this character come from? One of the neat things that Anthony's had us do in our Mythos Mithras game is the idea, well, who would be looking for this person if they went missing? You already have the seeds for your next character planted, perhaps. Similar stuff is available in something like Delta Green. We haven't talked a lot about who these people know, but the fact that they're members of agencies. Somebody might be, kind of interested to see what happened to Agent Carlson. There's those kind of seeds planted there. Sometimes it can be a little rougher because there are no real obvious connections. Philippe Moreau, if he dies in our All for One game, which he's always really close to dying, at least I have a ready stable of people because the next character would have to be a musketeer. So, but there aren't any named musketeers. We haven't really thought about them, but you can figure out from whence this character actually came. Other times, it can be a little bit tougher. Now, one of the things I did in our Lamentations of the Martian Princess game, a game where it's very easy to make a backup character, I told the guys, go ahead, make 3 characters, figure out which one's going to be your primary, have these other guys, at the ready to be a backup character to kind of replace them. And I even invited them to, you can troop style play it if you want to. You can rotate which character you want to bring for which adventure. One guy's actually taken advantage of that, and that's been kind of fun. But what's happened with these backup characters? There's actually been a lot of interesting things that have happened or could potentially happen, which makes it relevant in terms of from whence do they come. We have one fellow, Dell actually hired one of his backup characters for some, I forget what they were actually doing, and he never actually got to play him because the guy died. So he rolled an 18 for strength or something, ridiculous, and never actually got to play this guy. He named him. I think Eloy actually rolled the dice for him in the combat where he finally died, but that was entertaining. On a more serious note, we've seen Todd kind of go back and forth with 2 characters and having a lot of fun, taking one off screen, bringing another one on screen. His 3rd character really hasn't shown up anywhere, but that's been kind of neat too. So he's had a backup character but then used it and kind of tried one on for size, which has become really interesting because they've gone from Mars 1 to Mars 2, time travel and all that kind of awful stuff that happens with alternate realities. But here we are in this very interesting situation as the group moves from City A to City B with a caravan of 40 people in tow, which there's this attrition going on. Now the attrition has become quite rapid. Part of what I've constantly, the discussion we've had about these backup characters is, okay, depending on where you are, just kind of think of where these other characters are. And part of the instructions I also gave to them, what we talked about in sessions there, was figure out why they know each other. Don't have these be random people. Figure out why do they know the existing characters, maybe not just your main character, but the other characters. So it's easy to kind of insert them. So, and here's where it gets interesting. I was promising something interesting, right? These backup characters, and this isn't just true in our Martian game, but can be true in any kind of game where you have a backup character at the ready. They're in this state of kind of this quantum superposition. I think CGA would get a kick out of that, bring in some quantum physics. You're not exactly sure where they are, but I had this idea. Okay, well keep in mind where is this guy? And Eloy's characters are actually kind of a perfect example because he made 3 wizards, all disciples of the same wizard that's gone missing. And so it makes logical sense that they would all be members of this house where this caravan is, or where the caravan has actually come from. So it's always keep in mind, well, where are these other characters, just in case your character dies? And so we can kind of insert them. But I said you can change this depending on what's going on. Since they've gone from Mars 1 to Mars 2, this is getting confusing now. Now you have to consider that these guys might not exactly be the same characters you thought they were. So just think some more about this. So we're in this position now where, once again, caravan's moving from City A to City B. So nobody's declared my backup character is in this caravan, but there are 40 people, so it's plausible. Maybe they're in the next city if they actually get to the next city. But you know, the idea is that, okay, your character may die during this trip, in which case have your other backup character at the ready, right? So you're not really declaring that they're there. There's 40 people, and now there's 16 people. And at some point in this event of attrition, you may find yourself in this odd situation of standing face to face with your backup character because he's the only other guy left. You know, it's kind of funny, this idea that, you know, your backup character could have been there all along, but silent in the background. You know, so from whence do they come, I think, is the more interesting question than do you have a backup character ready. It is one of those things that just makes me laugh every time, that, you know, it would be very, especially in games that can be highly lethal, you know, like something like Delta Green, Mythos Mithras. You know, character creation is a little arduous. Lamentations of the Flame Princess, you know, also deadly. But where am I more likely to make a backup character at the ready? When I can roll 3d6 6 times, not when it takes me 15 or 20 minutes. That makes me laugh. But, you know, from whence do these backup characters actually come, and how to insert them into the fiction in a way that makes sense, that doesn't strain credulity. They're not just in the next room, prisoner of orcs. Interesting questions. What do you think about that? What's your experience been?